All right, welcome to this 20 minutes yoga stretching session. So you can start by doing some just light neck rolls to the left. And then you can switch directions. And then you can get into all fours for a cat-cow. So this will just help loosen up the neck and also the thoracic spine. So for this, you definitely want to breathe in a certain way. So you want to breathe in when you're looking up, and then breathe out when you round. And then back in, looking up, and then out when you round. Now I'm talking, so it's hard for me to talk and breathe at the same time, but if I do it, you should really be able to hear me breathing pretty loud. So the other thing is you want to really push into the ground decently hard with your hands so that you not only get like your lumbar spine moving, but you really want to make sure your thoracic spine is moving as well. So you should possibly feel some stretch up towards your shoulder blades. And the way to do that, again, is if you really look up and at the same time at least push your hands somewhat into the ground, maybe not super hard, but at least pushing your hands and really keeping your elbows straight and your hands pushing into the ground while you're also looking up. You should start to feel between your shoulder blades more of getting into your thoracic spine and even above your shoulder blades to feel that moving too. So it's not just about moving the lumbar spine. You want to make sure your shoulder blades and your thoracic spine is also moving as well. You kind of just do it maybe for about a minute, but you really want to be breathing nice and hard there. You want to be like making sure you can really hear your breath and taking really nice deep breaths. Those will help kind of loosen everything up as well. So while you're here on all fours, you can also do some of these guys, which I don't know their name, but it's when you put your left arm out and your right leg out like this. And I can't turn sideways or you won't be able to see me, except maybe a little bit. And then go back and do it again. And back. And do it again. And back. Maybe do this 10 times. And when you get to your 10th time, you can hold the last one and just hold it in this position and really try to reach up with your foot and up with your arm to extend as much as possible. You can hold it for about 10 seconds and then let it go. And then you'll switch arms and legs and you'll do the same thing. So 10 times. You want to squeeze your glutes ideally here. It's not so easy to target them exactly, but you don't want to be all using your hamstring or all using your back. You want to squeeze your glutes, and inevitably you're going to use some of your back and some of your hamstring, but trying to squeeze your glutes. Again, it's not always so easy to do. It's not so easy to target, but through some of these exercises, you'll be able to hopefully start getting some body awareness of how to do that. So once you have 10 on this side, you again hold the last one for 10 seconds or so. Okay. Another thing you can try as you're going through these exercises is sitting back like this. This can be very hard. It's been hard in the past for me. I'm getting better at it, but it can be quite hard just to sit on your heels. From the side, it looks like this. My knees crack as I do it, but I guess that's part of where my knees are at right now, but hopefully that'll change over time. But as you're moving through, if you just need a quick break, this is a good thing because it can help work on your posture, but then stretch these quads out a little bit and also stretch your shin muscle out as well. And this is something that, you know, it might be hard to sit in this position for long. It is for me even still now, but at the same time, it's something you can work on. If you can't get back here, you can also just sit like here. It'll be, if you're leaning a little forward, it'll make it easier. And if that's all you can do, that's all you can do. But even doing that for 15, 20 seconds can just help and slowly move back, which gets harder and harder and harder as you move back with your body instead of leaned over like this. So as you move back, though, you're getting more and more flexible, and hopefully over time you can do that. So again, just sitting in this position while you're resting or so, that can be very useful. Now we can come into our first child's pose, which actually is not just a completely passive stretch. It actually is something that really can stretch out your back and stretch out your arms as well, especially your rotator cuff. So if we come into that, one thing you can do, while you can stay down, but I'll speak up here just so you can hear me. One thing you can do as you're in your child's pose is actually pushing down into the ground with your arms. And you're probably going to feel that in kind of your shoulder area, around your rotator cuff and elsewhere in your shoulder. And by pushing out down for about 5 seconds and then letting off, and pushing down for 5 more seconds, letting off, that'll actually help these kind of contract and relax sequence can slowly help loosen up that muscle. So that actually applies to a lot of things, really anything you can do that contract, relax. So this is a great time to do that in child's pose, to be pushing down into the ground with your hands for 5 seconds, then relax, then down again for 5 seconds, then relax. And hopefully at this point, you've got that really nice child's pose stretch. Now, another variation that really is useful that you can do when you're down here right now is to then thread one hand instead of child's pose. You can thread one hand under and do this kind of twisted one. And this other hand can either be up or down. Probably down is better, mainly because when it's down, you can actually do the same thing. You can push into the ground for 5 seconds, then relax. Push into the ground for 5 seconds. That's mainly with this hand, although you could even do it with both hands. So both hands can be pushing into the ground for 5 seconds and relaxing, but doing that same thing here and just hanging out here for about 30 seconds. But again, while you're hanging out, you're doing those 5 seconds on, 5 seconds off kind of thing. Then if you come back to the center, you can go the other way. Again, push 5 seconds, both hands if you can, into the ground. Then relax. Then 5 more seconds, both hands into the ground. Then relax. Then 5 more seconds, both hands in the ground. And then relax. And you can either come back to the center for a second, and then you can come into your first downward dog. And this is nice because it helps get your calves, especially, and maybe some of your hamstrings to loosen them up. One thing I do in downward dog, which you might be able to see here, is that I kind of, especially the first time, just kind of rocking back and forth between the feet just to kind of loosen them up in a dynamic way instead of pushing them too hard when they're not ready to have that load on there. Instead, just kind of loosening them up nice and gently in a dynamic way, and then maybe getting into a more of like a static downward dog. But this, you can actually hold for decently long, and then if you need to come down, I actually come down for a second, and really, instead of just flying through this position, I actually stay here for a good amount of time, maybe then go up again. And you can also, if you see what I'm doing here, you can also bend your knees and kind of go back here to, you can feel more of your arms stretching. And then here, you feel more of your legs stretching. Here, more of your arms stretching overhead, and here, more of your legs stretching again. So you can rock back and forth and then again you can rest. But I don't like to just fly through this. I like to take some time in this downward dog. Finally, now we can start doing some actual flow. So you can go back to downward dog, and then you can come up into a plank pose, down to chaturanga, and up to upward facing dog. Then you can go back to downward dog, and we can flow through this to plank, chaturanga, to upward facing dog. And then back to downward dog, to plank, to chaturanga, to upward facing. When you do that chaturanga, you can kind of do it like a push-up, so you can kind of go slowly down. The slower you go, the harder it is. But that's a good way to kind of get some push-ups, kind of like motion in your flow. So you can do this maybe anywhere from 5 to 10 times, depending on how good you're feeling. And you can really pause in certain positions, like here, for instance, just to really get that stomach abs area to really get a nice stretch before you go continue on. And if you need to stop at any point, even now my arms are getting a little tired, then you just stop for a second and go back into it. But ideally getting 5 to 10, but maybe even more like 8 to 10 of these flows in, and those kind of just help loosen everything up. Remember, again, you can take a break anytime, and this is a good way, again, to go into this kind of position just to get more comfortable with this position. And you can also go into child's pose if you wanted to. So yeah, the point is not to rush through these. The point is just to do them comfortably and get through them by doing it how you need to and at the pace you need to. So if you take a break 3 times to get through maybe 10 flows or something, that's what you need. So the next step would be to get into more of getting into the warrior poses. And there's like a few things I do here. There's a couple ways you could get into it. You could go to down dog and step your leg forward. I actually don't like doing that because it kind of puts a lot of strain when I try to, because I'm not that flexible to really step my leg all the way forward. It can be hard. So you can try that. When you go here and you step your leg forward, that's fine. If you can get there, if not, don't worry about it. Just find a way to get your leg there. But you can actually just hang out here for a second, because even this is a good stretch for your hip and your hamstring. And then you can go into, I'm going to move back a little bit. You can go to a warrior 1 position. I don't spend a ton of time in each one. I just maybe 5-10 seconds in each one. But this is a nice little progression. So you go here, then into warrior 2. So a lot of this is a little bit in the arms, but mostly getting a nice stretch and also a bit of strengthening in this kind of lunge position. So lunge is a very important position to do, so to get some strengthening in there and some stretching in there is good stuff. Again, about like 5 to 10 seconds in each one, depending on how much. Then you can go into this, I don't know the name, but when you go back and come up, and you're just stretching, especially through here, then you can kind of reverse that. Hand on, elbow on your front quad, arm up, and you look back up to that back raised arm. I'll go slightly sideways just to make sure you can see. You might feel different things stretching. Of course, this hand might be stretching, but you might also feel places like your hip and then maybe your hamstring. 5 to 10 seconds on each I think is fine. Finally, I come and get a hamstring stretch on this front leg. So I put my hands behind my back, keep that leg nice and straight, and bend over without rounding your back. So trying to keep your back pretty straight, but bend over to get a hamstring stretch on this front leg. I think this might be called humble warrior pose. 5 to 10 seconds on each one of those positions I just showed you. At the end, you can always jump back to one. Like if I just feel like I really like Warrior 2, so to jump back in that for a second, just to get a little more. And you can always sink a little deeper. Instead of being up here, you can sink deeper. But you can kind of just get an extra stretch if you feel like that's helpful. But if not, you can finish up. And you can try to come back to this position and then go back into a downwards dog. And then what I would do is go through a flow at least one time. And then maybe just hang out for a second. So if you're really feeling good, you can go straight into the next part, which would be doing the same thing we just did, but with the other leg. But if at all you're not feeling quite ready, you take a break. Because again, you're not trying to rush through things here. You're just trying to relax and have a nice calm session. And again, you can take a break at this position, but here's actually where really a child pose would be nice. And really with the child's pose, you are stretching your back and definitely these shoulders again. So you do want to make sure you really, that position is not just a rest position. It really is a nice stretch. So if you can go to child's pose, you can continue to stretch these shoulders. So I'd recommend, if you're at all, unless you're just really feeling great, if you're at all tired, you can definitely do that before you jump in to the next part, which would be the same thing we just did, but now reverse legs. So put your other leg forward. And again, you can try to do that by going in a down dog, but you don't have to, and stepping forward. But if that seems, or you can do it part way and then kind of move your leg forward like I just did, but then try to hold out this position for a second, because this is a good position. So 5 to 10 seconds again here. Then we go into our first warrior position. However you need to get there. If it takes you a second to get there, that's fine. But going to warrior position, I feel it stretch on this hip. That's definitely common. Also these hands, don't just have them forward, like really try to bring them back by your ears or even behind your ears, but that's probably not going to be very feasible, but at least back far. Don't have them just hanging out here. Stretch those shoulders just as much as you're stretching kind of in here. 5 to 10 seconds, then you switch to the warrior 2. Now on this side, sink nice and deep. After that, to this reverse kind of triangle pose, or what exactly the name is, I don't quite know. And again, try to really reach your arm. I wasn't doing the greatest job at first, but now I am reaching further. And then the elbow on your knee and looking back. And finally, the one where you have your straight leg and you try to keep your back straight without bending over, without curving it. So it bends forward, but it doesn't curve. It tries to stay straight, and you can think about keeping your neck kind of out so your neck's not dipping down. That's how you know your back's staying a little bit straighter. But bending enough that you're feeling this front leg get a hamstring stretch. And then when you're done, you come down however you want. And again, take a break either in child's pose or like this. Either one is doing stretching, so neither one is just pure rest. They're both stretching at least something. Next, it would be good to do some kind of back workout. So probably the best way is a Superman. It would be good to incorporate this at least somewhere, because you don't want to completely, not really be working your back. So that is where you just are going like this, And I'll show you a few angles of it, but you're just lifting your feet up and you're lifting your arms up. And that one you can hold for really as long as you can, but maybe trying to get close to a minute really. And if you're not able to get that, that's okay, but then you stop and then you start again. But that one's really good for your back. So to try to get a minute total, even if it takes 10 different times of 6 seconds each, to get a minute total of doing a Superman. Now we'll just get into a little bit of actual stretching, and that's pretty much it for the yoga. But there's a couple of things that would be nice to get, especially if you're going to work on trying to sit like this, which I've had a very hard time for a long time, but it's getting better and better to be sitting like this. And it's important because it just helps you actually be flexible enough to sit like this, which also gives you flexibility for other things. So one way to actually sit like that is to do a little more of this butterfly, which will help work on getting those hips more loose and your glutes working to pull your knees down. So here's one way you can do it. You can sit like this, but again, this is a passive stretch, and if we make this more active, here's how you can do it. So notice that I'm putting my hands behind me like this, and then I'm going to actually lift up. So lift myself off the ground. Now not like crazy like this, just here, just a little bit, like an inch off the ground, but you should feel kind of the inside of your hamstring area, like in here, you should feel that stretching some. And then you can go back and forward and back and forward. Now, that's not it. There's one more piece to this, which is when you're forward, to try to do that same 5-second thing we did before, where you pull these with your glutes, you pull your knees down towards the ground. So instead of just passive, you're actually using your muscles. If you just saw, my knees dropped considerably. Now I'm going to raise them up again, but when they drop, I'm really using my muscles to actually pull them to the ground, not just like letting them float to the ground by gravity, but actually pulling them with my muscles, especially my glutes, to pull them to the ground and push decently hard to really try to pull them to the ground. You can do that for 5 seconds and then relax. So you'll see the same 5-second pattern here. When you relax, then you can come here. And then you go back close again. Again, 5 more seconds. Really pull them to the ground. Pull those knees down to the ground, 5 seconds. And then relax. And when you relax, go back. And that kind of just loosens things up. When you're here, go down again, 5 seconds. And if you sat cross-legged before this, it'd be great to do this for about 10 reps, relax. 10 reps is a little much. You can definitely do just more like 5 to 7 reps of this, and each rep would be a 5-second hold, a 5-second, pull down to the ground. So again, 5 seconds, pulling those knees down to the ground. You try to use your glutes to do it, and then relax. Yeah, probably more like five of those 5-second holds total would be plenty. If you did the cross-legged before, and then try the cross-legged again, you should feel considerably looser. But obviously this takes time, so doing it once is not going to have groundbreaking results, but at the same time, doing this every single day or multiple times a week you'll slowly start to see this improve, which I did. It might take a month to really see significant improvement, but it will come if you just keep doing this. We're going to do some other sitting hip stretches, but before that, the best thing is to kind of go in this kind of position and just rock your hips from side to side. This is not super comfortable for me, but the idea is just to loosen those hips up even more. Another thing you can try is doing something. This is good, like after you've already done the yoga workout. Now you're done, you're just kind of doing a little bit of stretching just to kind of loosen things up. Here's another one. Moving your legs all the way to one side like this, and maybe even holding this and kind of pulling this back, because if you do that, then you're getting definitely a quad stretch as well. So here, now I'm using my hand to hold me up over here because it's hard to otherwise, but especially if I'm not doing as much of this quad stretch, I might be able to see if I can actually not use my hands to hold myself up over here, and I might just be able to hang out like this. And even if it's a little hard, maybe you hold here to help you a little bit, but this again will kind of help those hips. So if you can, you try to keep your glutes on the ground. You try to keep yourself as much, to the straight as possible, but I am definitely curving or tilting some to the side, but that's just where I am right now, and over time hopefully that'll keep improving. But again, from here, and even with no hands supporting you, you might be able to still pull this back as well to kind of help stretch this as well. But this is a good position to just hang out in for a little bit. Then you switch. So we tried sitting cross-legged. We did an exercise for improving the cross-legged, and now we're doing this, which is definitely getting into the hips as well. Next, if you can get into this kind of position, here's just another hamstring stretch. But from here, you have a lot of leverage to make this active. So instead of this leg just doing absolutely nothing, this leg can actually be actively pushing into the ground. The best way to do that is with your heel, because that's the only contact point it has. So with your heel, you're pushing into the ground. When you push into the ground with your heel, doing nothing with your arms right now, just push into the ground with your heel, you'll actually feel this hamstring working a little bit, or even a lot bit, and stretching. So you push into the ground. Now this will still follow the same rule where you push for 5 seconds, then relax. When you relax, you can loosen up. You can bend your knee. Then go again, push 5 seconds, then relax. Then push 5 seconds, then relax. So this is actually a great way to stretch the hamstring. It works a lot better than just trying to go like this and reaching for it. While this leg is passive, that doesn't really do that much. Much better is don't even reach, but just push down with your heel, which really makes this hamstring work. And relax, and just do that for 5 seconds at a time, and maybe do 5 or 6 of those. Now, if you can't get into this position, that might be another story, but at least this gives you something to work towards. And if you can't get in this position, you have to figure out, I guess, what is the limiting factor and why you can't get into it, but hopefully you can get into it at least a little bit, which probably, if you can't get into it, you might be like leaning back and not really being able to lean forward. That's okay. As long as you can get that foot to push into the ground, you can really get this hamstring to work. And slowly over time, you'll be able to lean more and more forward. So you don't really need to reach here, but what you probably could do is bend with your torso, bend from the waist forward, and also push your heel into the ground, doing those 5 seconds on and off, contract and relax. And the more you push your torso, bending at the waist, the more you push it forward, the more stretch you're going to get in your hamstring. However, you got to be careful here because you're going to tend to round your back, and you got to make sure you don't round your back. So better is to just be straight up. If you're really straight and have good posture, it'd be better to be here and be doing this exercise than being too far forward where you can't handle it, and then you're starting to round your back unnecessarily. So do it right first before you go any further. And yes, it is good to also lean your torso forward, but only if you're keeping your back relatively straight. Otherwise, you're going to be working the wrong thing, and putting too much pressure on your lower back. So if you keep your back relatively straight and lean forward, go forward as far as you can, and then you're going to do these 5 seconds on and off times 5 or 6. But that is really the position right there. That's a really good one for your hamstring. And then you can switch legs. So bend forward as far as you can without rounding your back too much, and then 5 seconds on by pushing down into the ground. Not crazy hard, but enough that you feel like you're getting a nice solid stretch, but without like pushing it overly. And relax. And 5 more seconds. And relax. And 5 more seconds. Then relax. You're doing about 5 or 6 of these total. Okay. And then you're done. And again, after every time you're done, you can go back into this, which is definitely stretching your hamstring. I mean, it's stretching your quads and your shin muscle. You'll just get more and more used to being in this position and being comfortable with this. And over time, it'll get easier and easier. The other thing that's really good is a spinal twist, which you do get at some of the yoga poses, but sometimes it is nice to do it on the floor. The only thing is you really should have kind of a folded up towel under your head if you're going to do this. But this is actually a very good stretch. So to do it, you go sideways like this and laying on the towel, the folded up towel, so you're not just straining your neck. And you're to the side, and you take your arm over, and I have to move over so I can actually do this. But you take your arm over all the way to here if possible. If you can get this side, the shoulder blade down to the ground, that's excellent. That's a good sign that you're decently flexible in your spine. And you can do it for about like 5-7 seconds and then actually come back and then do it again. And you don't want these knees to start coming and drifting all the way off the ground. You want to ideally keep them on the ground while you twist that way. So again, knees should not be coming up. They should be staying pretty much stacked over one another on the ground while your spine does this nice twist. Here, you can just hang out. One thing also is helpful here is to really take some nice deep breaths, so you can hang out for longer than 5 seconds each, or you can keep doing 5 seconds kind of and then off and then 5 seconds off. But sometimes it's nice, especially at the end, to hang out for longer and take 3 really nice deep breaths, and including a long exhale too. So don't discount the exhale. Make the exhale nice and long, and taking really nice deep breaths here. This can stretch your spine. It also stretches these pectoral muscles. So depending on where you're tight or not tight, you might feel it in different spots, but it should be stretching both, really, the pectorals and the spine. After that, you would just switch and do the other side. Again, you can maybe do 5 to 7 seconds and come back, and then 5 to 7 seconds. And maybe do 4 of those, and then on the 5th one though, then you're gonna hold, like I said, for longer, probably a total of 15 seconds or so, while taking 3. Don't even worry about counting, but just take 3 really, really nice and big deep breaths, coming in all the way in and then all the way out before starting again. And during those, when you have all the air in, when you're at the top of your inhale, where you really have inhaled the most air and you're kind of to your max, that's kind of when you probably should feel the most stretching, especially like maybe in your pectoral muscles or possibly elsewhere. But you really, when you take that deep breath, the further you breathe in, the more you'll actually feel it stretching. So your breath will actually help stretch your muscles. And once you've done 3 really nice deep breaths in that spot, then you're good to go. The one last thing that would be ideal is to spend some time in this squat position. It might be hard to get into. If it's hard, then you just keep your hands behind you. But just spending some time here. We never spend time in this squat position, or rarely spend time in our modern life. So keep your hands here if you have to. See if you can maybe take one hand off and put a little more weight on the legs, and then switch. So do what you need to do. Now at some point though, and the more you practice this, the better you'll get. Then you'll try to come to here. One other thing you can do is you can grab onto something. So this can easily help make this work. If you can't do it without anything, you just hold on to something. This is super helpful. Just relaxing in this position, trying to stay here. Now the thing is, even if you're holding on, there's a good chance you'll actually feel it not only in your quads, but you might actually feel it in your shins. And that is because this position is not something we're used to doing. So we have a kind of a neutral would be here, but going, I think this is a dorsiflex, but I don't know the exact term, but when you flex up like this, we're not used to doing that. So it's actually going into that position, that flexed position, when you're like this. And it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily used to going in that position. So because of that, the most you might feel here is actually in your shins. That's not a surprise. And it just means you need to keep working on this position, get those shins stronger and also more flexible. This will actually do both. It'll get them stronger and more flexible. So again, if you need to, you put your hands behind, or really better would be, if you need to, you hold on to something. But if you can not hold on to something, that's great, because that's starting to really work this position. Even if you don't hold on to anything and you're to this level, you still probably will really feel it in your shins, and then you might have to stop and maybe go back. But see if you can spend a good minute there in that position, and just know that it's going to take time. It's going to take months, but over time, you'll start to really get into this position, and then eventually you can actually kind of move around in here, and even like purposely shift your weight to one leg, then another leg, and so forth. You can kind of just play around in there, and by playing around in there, it kind of helps further strengthen each one of those shin muscles, really. So now you're done. You can come into a cross-legged position. You might feel that this position is a little easier because you've been stretching, and maybe now it's a little bit easier to sit here. But again, over time, over months, this is going to get much, much easier. I know, because I've been doing it, and it's been getting a lot easier. Before I felt like I was falling back, that I was so inflexible that the only way to do it would be to hold my hands behind me here to sit like this. But now I can actually pretty comfortably sit up here, and it probably was all within about 2 months, which, that sounds like a long time, but it also is not that long. And the bottom line is, these things take time. So if you just start getting to work, then they'll start to improve. The last thing you can do here is do a little thankfulness for the ability to move. And I think that's important, just to kind of realize that, that you're grateful, and that you're thankful and have gratitude towards the fact that you are able to do a movement practice. So you can kind of do it however way you want. Maybe in yoga they put hands here and then sometimes hands down here, but just kind of thanking yourself, thanking the earth, and thanking anything, any kind of higher powers that you believe, but just thanking for and being thankful for this movement, because it really is a gift to have all of this wonderful abilities to do all these different movements. So doing that each time is a nice way to center yourself and kind of end the practice and start you off on the rest of your day.